Okay, so let's be real. It feels like we're living through this massive AI explosion, right? Tools like ChatGPT are popping up everywhere. They seem to be changing everything. But here's the thing. For all that noise, there's this one super simple question that's surprisingly tough to answer. Who is really using this stuff? All right, here's the game plan. First, we're going to talk about the big AI blind spot, what we can't see. Then I'll introduce you to a new way to measure all this. From there, we'll actually map out the AI world, dig into the connection between wealth and AI, and finally, uncover this really cool hidden opportunity. So let's dive right in. The main issue here is that for a technology that's supposed to be this huge global revolution, our view of it is, well, it's pretty blurry. Okay, so what do we know for sure? Well, AI is the fastest growing tech in history. I mean, it makes the rise of the internet or smartphones look slow. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people jumping on board in just a couple of years. The scale is just, wow, it's mind-boggling. But, and this is a big but, for all that incredible speed, the moment you ask, okay, but who is all this really? Who's using it around the world? That's when things get fuzzy, fast. You know, the data we have right now is kind of like trying to describe an entire elephant by just looking at its ear. We get these little pieces, a survey of US adults here, a report on how many companies are using it there, or we get numbers that only count people who are already online. None of it, and I mean none of it, gives us that complete global picture. All right, so to solve this problem, to get past that blind spot, researchers came up with something new, a totally different way of measuring AI use. Basically, a new global yardstick. It's called the AI user share, and honestly, it's a game changer. See, instead of just counting website visits or talking to a small group of people, this metric estimates the percentage of a country's entire working age population. We're talking everyone from 15 to 64 that's actively using AI. This is the big picture we've been looking for. So you're probably wondering, how on earth did they figure that out? Well, it's actually a pretty clever three-step process. First, they start with a huge pool of data on active AI users. Then they adjust that for how many people in a country actually have a desktop computer. And finally, and this is key, they scale it all up to include everyone using AI on their phones. Okay, so now we have our new tool. What happens when we actually use it to map the entire planet? Well, what we find is a pretty massive divide. And boom, here it is. For the first time, a clear map of who's using AI. And you don't need to be a data scientist to see the pattern. That deep blue where usage is highest, it's all clustered in North America, Western Europe, and a handful of other rich countries. And then, well, you see huge parts of the world in yellow and red. It's the digital divide, right there in front of us. And if we break that map down by region, the story gets even sharper. Look at North America, leading the charge with over a quarter of its working age population using AI. Now, compare that to sub-Saharan Africa. It's below 9%. That's a huge gap. So where does that leave the world as a whole? The global average comes out to about 15%. So to put that in perspective, right now, roughly 1 out of every 7 working age people on the planet is an active AI user. But of course, some countries are just miles ahead of that average. And check out the leaders. You might be surprised. The UAE and Singapore are in a whole other category, with almost 60% adoption. That's incredible. And right behind them, you've got a bunch of highly developed European countries, as you might expect. So that brings us to the big question. Why? Why are there these huge gaps? Well, as it turns out, the data points to a really clear, really powerful connection, and it has a lot to do with money. The best way to think about it is like a funnel. To even get to the point where you can use AI, you need to pass through a few gates. First, you need electricity. Obvious, right? Then you need an internet connection. Then you need the skills to actually use a computer or a phone effectively. And with each of those steps, you can see how some people get filtered out. And this chart, this just says it all. On one axis, you have a country's wealth, its GDP. On the other, it's AI adoption. And the pattern is crystal clear. The richer the country, the higher the AI usage. It's almost a straight line up. You're literally looking at the link between money and technology. And this isn't just a visual thing, by the way. The actual statistical number here is a correlation of 0.83. Now, if you're not a stats person, just know this. That is a very strong connection. It basically means that a country's wealth is one of the single best predictors of how much its people use AI. But, okay, if the story was just rich countries use more AI, that would be kind of boring. But it's not. Because when you dig just a little bit deeper, you find something that totally changes the narrative. You find this massive hidden opportunity. Let's look at a country like Zambia. On the surface, its overall adoption rate is about 12%, a bit below the global average. But here is the mind-blowing part. If you zoom in and look only at the people in Zambia who are connected to the internet, their AI adoption rate jumps to 34%. That's not just a little higher, that's more than double the global average. And this isn't just about Zambia. This chart tells the same story for a whole group of countries. See those black dots? That's their low overall adoption. But look at the blue diamonds. That represents the people in those countries who are online. And they are using AI like crazy, at rates that are right up there with the rest of the world, sometimes even higher. What does that tell you? The demand is absolutely there. So what's the big takeaway here? It's this. The main barrier to AI adoption in so many parts of the world isn't a lack of interest. It's not a lack of demand. The biggest obstacle, plain and simple, is just getting a good internet connection. There's this huge latent demand just sitting there, waiting to be unlocked. And that leaves us with a really powerful thought to end on. It seems we have a world full of people who are ready and even eager to jump into this AI revolution. So the final question is, if we can solve that one fundamental problem, if we can build the digital roads and get everyone online, what happens then? What could a truly global AI revolution really look like?